Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with my review of NXT for June 22nd, 2021. Before I get into that though, I do want to address what a lot of people have been asking me for the last couple of weeks, is if I'm done reviewing AEW Dynamite, and the answer is I'm not reviewing it as long as it's not on Wednesday. Except for that first episode there on Friday a few weeks ago, I've not really been touching AEW because it's on these days I have a hard line against working for. That's why Jay Biggs does SmackDown every Friday night, because I don't work Fridays. So that's the reason I've not been reviewing Dynamite for the last several weeks, and I apologize for the lack of coverage on this channel, but I do know it's coming back to Wednesdays next week on the 30th, and so I'm looking forward to reviewing that and getting back into the swing of things. As far as the format for the reviews, I think it's going to be more a standalone video. I kind of like the idea now of doing NXT and Dynamite on separate reviews now, instead of trying to ham-fist the whole like war thing anymore. I don't think it'll be a who wore it better style video next week. I don't think it's going to be in one video anymore. It's going to be basically Tuesday nights I review NXT, Wednesdays I review Dynamite, and that's pretty much how it's going to operate, I feel, going forward. So I hope you all enjoy that change. And of course, as always, like what you like, don't be a dick. Let's begin. So NXT begins with Adam Cole making his way to the ring. He's supposed to have a match with an opponent of his choosing, but he says on the microphone, just because Samoa Joe is back in town doesn't mean he's got to follow any of these stodgy rules. But out comes Carmelo Hayes, who shoots his shot, and he challenges Cole to a match right then and there. He even invokes the great John Cena by saying he's got ruthless aggression, and then he says, yeah, same energy, and he slaps Cole. And that part I thought was not great. I think it's a very lofty comparison to kind of like put yourself in that tier, and I get the whole cockiness thing, but you know, it's something that I've heard often for a long time, and I still kind of believe it, where if somebody invokes, like it makes a direct reference to something that someone more famous did, that all people are going to do is just think about the more famous thing and not really focus on the newer person doing that same thing. I mean, they don't really bring up this direct comparison very often. The last time I remember them doing that actually was like Jason Jordan fighting John Cena. So that was a while ago, and that was very deliberate, and this felt even more deliberate and more like forced by just directly quoting him and doing that. Whereas the Jason Jordan thing, they just showed like, hey, remember this highlight package? That being said, Hayes gives Cole a run for his money in this matchup. It's very competitive. They give it a fair amount of time here. In the end though, Cole hits the Panama Sunrise to beat Hayes for the 1-2-3. Wow, I can't remember the last time that actually was done to finish a match. So anyway, it was a good showing for Hayes. Now, is he destined for superstardom with this direct comparison to Cena thing? You know, time will tell, but he's only a couple of matches into being NXT, and he's already had a couple of good looks. We see a clip from earlier where Frankie Monet is backstage chatting with Aaliyah and Jessica Mea, more kind of talking shop here. Robert Stone enters wearing a very perplexing blazer, and he's doing high fives all around, but when he goes to Frankie, suddenly Frankie's dog Presley nips at him. And then we get a backstage interview with Jessie and Aaliyah's opponents, Zoe Stark and Io Shirai, and Zoe's asked why she helped Io last week. She says, you know, Io gave me a shot, now I'm just returning the favor, but I don't know why we're tag teaming because of Io's history with tag team partners. And Io walks in and says, I respect you, but I don't like you. And that's all she has to say. And then we get a promo from the new $1 million champion, LA Knight, sitting poolside at a palatial estate, basically running down what happened at the coronation last week where he beat up Ted DiBiase and Cameron Grimes came in for the save, and he basically mocks Cameron for having some compassion for this old man DiBiase and whatnot. And so basically, you know, standard heel promo with the LA Knight style, how he's just better than and richer than everybody else. It's time for an appearance from the Way. Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory make their way to the ring, and Gargano says it's time for a new NXT champion, and he believes it's him. He says he can out-wrestle Karrion Kross on his worst day. Pete Dunne and Oney Lorcan then show up, and there's a bit of a confrontation. Dunne tries to provoke Theory and Gargano, but Johnny's having none of this, and he basically says, kind of like invoking the whole Law and Order thing with William Regal and Samoa Joe now, saying we're law-abiding citizens, we are good people, basically, like we don't want to get into this kind of nonsense. So Gargano goes to leave, but Austin can't leave well enough alone. He puts his fingers into Dunne's face, and of course he snaps his fingers as a result. Then a bit later, Gargano and Theory go to Regal's office and try and kiss ass, but Regal's having none of it and puts them in a tag team match with Dunne and Lorcan in a few minutes after this next tag team match. So the promo in the ring by itself I thought was just kind of like flat, like didn't really get much of a vibe to that one. It just felt kind of flat. But then when you combine it with like this follow-up clip backstage, it all kind of ties together and makes it stronger. So how that story will go, we'll find out in a few minutes. Outside the CW you see Cameron Grimes rolls up in his Rolls Royce. He has a chat with a couple of guys outside, gives him some money. Then Ari Sterling, the former Alex Zane, gets in Cameron's face and makes fun of Ted DiBiase being old. And so Cameron pops him in the mouth. And that's the end of that segment there. And then we see backstage with Adam Cole post-match, and Willie Reeves enters the room and basically tells him to stay away from Samoa Joe and not to confront him or provoke him again. But Cole is not having any of this and basically says, you're letting things fly out of control. How can you not reprimand Samoa Joe for what he did to me? And then he storms off. Then we see Zoe Stark and Io Shirai teaming up to take on Jessi Kamea and Aaliyah. Shirai back in action on NXT for the first time in many a week since losing the Women's Championship to Raquel Gonzalez. Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell, the tag team champions, make their way to ringside as the match goes on. Kamea and Aaliyah look pretty good here, but it's a fairly academic matchup. You got Io hitting the big moonsault on Kamea to win the match for her team. Then afterwards, you got Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai confronting the winners and saying, hey, the tag team championships are ours, you get out of our way. And then you've got Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon showing up on the other side saying not to forget them. They all get in the ring and they all has fight with the champions, Indy and Candice, and everyone's involved in everything. So this seems to be where they're going with the women's tag title scene. It's like we were just saying, the last couple of weeks, where are the competitors for these belts at this point? So they're reintroducing Ember and Shotzi. They're kind of keeping Raquel and Dakota there. And now they seem to be incorporating this new tag team of Zoe and Io. So how long that can sustain itself, I have no idea, but it certainly, in the short term, certainly fills out the contendership for the belts in this kind of way. MSK versus Ciampa and Thatcher for the tag titles is announced for the Great American Bash in a couple of weeks. And then we see The Way taking on Pete Dunne and Oni Lorcan. You see Johnny and Austin frantically trying to get their entrance gear on as they make their way to the ring. And at the start of the match, I'm wondering, are there baby faces in this matchup here? Like, Gargano and Theory are kind of the baby faces by default because they're funny and they have a good shtick going, but they're still narcissists and total suck-ups, so it's kind of a hard sell at this moment. There's some hard-hitting action in this match, and The Way is definitely playing babyface a few minutes into this thing. Gargano's getting a big comeback and he's playing to the crowd, and there's Johnny wrestling chant and everything. Oh yeah, The Way is definitely playing baby at this point in the match here. Johnny with a swinging DDT on the outside to Dunne, one final beat to Lorcan to win the match, and then afterward, Karrion Kross jumps him from behind, kind of a receipt for the words that Gargano said earlier in the night. That seems to be where we're going with that, Gargano and Kross. And but it's very clear now that Gargano and Theory are playing good guys here. Again, it's because I think of their attitude and their kind of not comic relief, but they're definitely playing a more comedic tilt when they're cutting promos and stuff. So my only question is, how are you going to reconcile that with somebody who's competitive enough to face, Karrion Kross in kind of a one-on-one capacity like Gargano? And also, where does this leave the other side of The Way? Because Candice and Indy right now are still very much heels, I would think. And then from there, you wonder what's going on with Indy and Dexter Lumis. Karrion Kross confronts Samoa Joe backstage, and he reminds Joe that he can't lay a hand on him unless he is provoked, and Joe very sarcastically agrees and lets he and Scarlett on their merry way. He turns back around and we see Pete Dunne now, where Karrion once stood. We have a stare down with he and Joe. And all I'm thinking is, you're gonna give us this match, right? I mean, you've given us this stare down 2 weeks in a row, and you wouldn't do this if you weren't eventually leading to something. Right? Up next, Frankie Monet has an encore presentation of her world premiere as she takes on Elektra Lopez. Lopez gets a couple of shots in, does a bit of a dance, but hey, who do you think's the one getting over in this match, pal? Monet comes back fairly dominantly and hits the Glam Slam to win this match handily. So another little notch in the win column for Frankie here. We're backstage with Bronson Reed, who can't understand why Santos Escobar still wants a piece of him and wants a challenge for the North American title after what's been going on with them for the last several weeks. But suddenly Hit Row get into the interview space and they get right in Bronson's face. And as that's happening with Bronson and Top Dollar, suddenly Ashante the Adonis gets in the foreground of the shot, telling Everrise they're in for a rough night. Then after the break, we get a recap of something from earlier in the day where Everrise are wearing ski masks and they try and tag Hit Row's car, but then Top Dollar rolls the window down and it just says, the ski masks don't work when you're wearing your own merchandise, and they flee, which was hilarious. But just from a stacking standpoint, an order standpoint, why would you put that after the bit with Hit Row and Ashante talking? Why wouldn't you show that first to set up more of a context as to why they're fighting and beefing and everything, and then you get the little side comment from Ashante before their match. Then we get that match as Ashante the Adonis and Top Dollar of Hit Row take on Everrise. Martel and Parker actually managed to eject Top Dollar at one point in the match, but they celebrate a bit too exuberantly over that. It's a big old squash here, and Everrise take the loss, and after the match is over, you got Isaiah Swerve Scott taking up Martel afterward just for good measure, and Hit Row poses. We go backstage, and Mercedes Martinez learns she's got a mixed tag tag team match next week with Xia Li and Boa. She's trying to figure out who her partner is going to be, but as that happens, Xia Li jumps her. Boa's there too, and then suddenly Jake Atlas hits Boa and takes him out and helps Mercedes up. So we have a tag team here between Mercedes and Jake Atlas, and we have a match made for next week, which I'm looking forward to. We get a reminder the battery is still charging, currently at 50%, and then it's time for our main event as Kyle O'Reilly takes on Kushida in a non-title match, but it is billed all night as being an NXT dream match of sorts. And this is a very good match. It's given a whole lot of time, some very lovely grabs throughout, and it very slowly evolves into more of a hard-hitting, kind of a striking kind of thing, but still a lot of great technical wrestling throughout. There's a moment where Kyle gets Northern Lights suplexed on the apron. That looks pretty devastating, and his arm suffers from that. In the end, though, Kyle is able to roll through a hoverboard lock attempt into a pin of his own to win the match, and it's kind of a surprise ending there. There's some sportsmanship between the two of them, which is nice. Then after the match, though, Adam Cole runs in the ring, jumps Kyle. There's a bit of a brawl as security and Samoa Joe try and break that up. Suddenly in the ring, Kushida's by himself, but he's jumped by Roderick Strong, Tyler Rust, Hideki Suzuki, and they're the Diamond Mine as declared by Malcolm Bivens. So that's the foursome now. The Diamond Mine, which we've been seeing promos for several weeks now, it's finally come to fruition. This appears to be Roderick Strong's group, and that's very cool to see. What an impactful beginning for that, because you're getting kind of this fusion here. I don't know much about Hideki Suzuki. I don't know what his story is, but Roderick Strong, obviously, he seemingly resigned after the UE broke up, and Malcolm Bivens and Tyler Rust are doing their own thing, and now they're kind of joining forces. Very exciting what they're going to do with this. Roderick Strong is no stranger to stables, not just the UE, but also Generation Next and stuff like that. So it feels like a stable that's very much in that kind of image, so we'll see how that turns out. But after all the hype the Diamond Mine had, a lot of people speculated that Tessa Blanchard was going to be involved in this, but as of right now, it appears that is not the case, and very excited to see what the Diamond Mine can do. And as far as making an impact in their debut, they certainly did that. It was a pretty strong way to close the show. My grade for NXT this week is a B+. Very strong show this week. I like a lot of what they did here, and especially in terms of build for the Great American Bash, while also doing a good job building up things and building a lot of intrigue for some matches, a week down the line and stuff like that and further on. I think that, again, my one nitpicky thing about this show was just, not the Hayes-Cole match itself, but the very ham-fisted comparison, invoking John Cena and the Ruthless Aggression thing. It might be much ado about nothing, but just again, that whole thing of reminding you of the more famous thing can sometimes be detrimental to you when you do that. So again, we'll see if this is water under the bridge after that, and maybe it'll lead to something more. But I am very excited about the Diamond Mine, and all of a sudden you have the Diamond Mine there. You got Hit Row forming a few weeks before that. You got these stables, these factions forming, man. Things are heating up, and I'm very excited. But what did you think of NXT this week, folks? Let me know in the comment section below. And just a reminder, next week is going to be not only NXT, but my AEW Dynamite review returns the following Wednesday night. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.